Covering more details in the case of Kimberly Kessler, the woman suspected of murdering Jolene Cummings, a Nassau County hairstylist and mother of 3. Hours of video evidence reveal interviews between detectives and witnesses as they work with the FBI to build a case against Kessler. Our Shelby Danielson has been digging into her nearly 20 aliases.
Well, Anthony, the evidence released in the case reveals much more about her multiple personalities or multiple identities, as detectives put it. And to many people, she was known as Jennifer Seibert, but evidence shows detectives tracked down the real Jennifer Seibert, who actually died as a teenager in a car accident in 1987. And the real Seibert was from Butler County, Pennsylvania, where Kessler actually grew up too. Friends told detectives that they believe she would look for her aliases on gravestones and cemeteries. A former landlord tells detectives that Kessler was paranoid and dangerous.
She had quite a bit of obvious personality disorder. She's in jail.
Yeah, and we do not want her to get out. She's using different names, people who have died, she's taken their names.
We're going to have much more digging into her different identities coming up all new tonight at 11 in the newsroom. Shelby Danielson, First Coast News, on your side.